So like I was saying, super simple, no pressure whatsoever. At any point in time y'all ever want to stop, you're more than welcome to. I'm not gonna ask y'all to anything to upset you. That's not my point here at all. But first and foremost, like I said, I am Mike, the owner of Loudwater Outfitters. And then I'm not gonna yap a whole bunch. I'm gonna turn it over to y'all and just kind of let you tell your story. And then hopefully, if anybody's out there that's seeing this, I know a bunch of people are going to share it. They're going to watch it. Anybody that's in this area. Definitely, if you know something, say something. So with that being said, I'm gonna turn it over to y'all.
My son's name is Brandon Barron. He came up missing 34. He is getting
34 years of age.
he is getting ready to turn 37 in April. He got messed up in some drugs, possible schizophrenia. We don't know. He's been missing since June the 24th of 2020. My brain just went.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Take your time. And like I said, so I try not to interrupt. I'm not gonna do anything like that, but just kind of to help me out a little bit here. Now, and again, I want to make it extremely clear too that I don't judge and nobody that's part of anything that I do. We don't judge anybody on any of that, right? Nobody's perfect. That's not what we're here for. I'm not trying to, and we'd never take no holier than thou approach, right? So everybody's got secrets and things that they deal with and things of that nature. And again, that's our biggest or my biggest concern is a lot of these cases I feel like don't get the attention that they should just simply because of maybe somebody's past or their background, especially when it comes to mental health, drug usage, anything like that, right? Now there are some circumstances that I don't get involved with, and that but this isn't one of those whatsoever. So I just want to let you know, you don't have to be nervous, nothing like that. Okay, I just want you to be as relaxed as possible. I do want to ask though, so this is kind of how I'll do it. I just like to know a week prior to him going missing, the day or about the 72 hours from the time he went missing to after that, and then up until now, what has happened, just to kind of keep it that simple, and it gives a timeline for people to associate with. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So if you just want to walk me through that, maybe that'll help.
A few days before he went missing, what day was that we had been contacted by law enforcement?
That was the morning of.
Oh, that was the same morning that he went missing. Well, I guess I'll back it up a little farther than that. He went missing on June the 24th, right around Valentine's Day that year. We had gotten some. We got a knock on our door in the evening time. My daughter was over, and it was the police, and they'd shown up with the county sheriff's department, and they were doing a welfare check because my son had been making some threats online against us and had threatened to kill us. And we didn't know really anything about it. We were kind of shocked, and we started trying to contact Brandon and everything, and we kept getting some really bizarre messages from him. Things that 1 minute he'd seem like he was okay, and then the next minute he would be just talking crazy stuff, and we finally were able to talk to him, and he was convinced. He told us that he was hearing voices in his head, but the voices were real. They weren't fake. I mean, he said they weren't in his mind or imagination. They were real, and they were being put there by the government, and they were using some kind of a voice to skull technology. He had been researching it or something, and he said he was convinced he had something called a golden ear or something, and he could hear conversations that people were having and thoughts that people were having from miles away. And he was convinced that I was in on a big plot to try to kill him, and he was going to eliminate me before I could eliminate him. And it was just bizarre things like that. And anyway, he kind of fell on some hard times. He ended up losing his job, did some couch surfing here and there, and I believe it was directly related to probably his mental condition, whether that was caused by drugs or the combination of drugs and a mental disorder, or if it was just purely drugs. I don't know the answer to that. He at one time had checked himself into a facility and was in for a few days. And when he came out, he told his sister that they had diagnosed him as schizophrenic. But when we confronted him with it or asked him about it, he denied it. I said confronted, but we really didn't confront. We were just, asking him about it. And, he said, no, that wasn't true. But, with him being paranoid and thinking that we were trying to do things to him, and, we didn't have his best intentions, in mind, that maybe that's why he didn't feel like he should share that with us, or, whether he was lying to his sister or lying to us, or, he's lying to somebody. But, anyway, drug on, for several months. And, like I said, he was kind of couch surfing, he was really kind of down, became homeless, and because of the death threats and the really bizarre behavior, I worked third shift, and his mother and I both didn't really feel comfortable with him being at home, so we didn't have him to come stay with us. So he was kind of staying with couch surfing with friends, like I said, and I think some homeless shelters. But
we also put him up in a motel a couple times.
Yeah, we paid for hotel rooms for him for a few times, but trying to help him out. But anyway, on the morning of June the 24th, it's like real early morning, 5 o'clock in the morning or something like that, we get a knock on our door, and it's the police again, and they've came out and they're doing welfare check. And I guess Brandon had been online on Facebook and had put up a post and was asking if anyone had a gun that he could borrow, because he needed to kill me before I killed him.
Okay.
And so anyway, they were out checking on me. Well, his mother was having a lot of medical issues at that time, ongoing medical issues. And she was doing treatments in a clinic in Fayetteville, Arkansas, a little city here about 20 miles away. And anyway, I was taking her into the clinic every day, driving her because she was unable to drive. So we had talked it over and made the decision that I was going to go up and try to get a protective order against, so he couldn't be coming out to the house. And, that way, if he did show up, maybe we could, the thought was that, if he showed up, maybe we could get him put in jail and then talk to a judge or something, and maybe get him some help through, through the courts or something.
Yes,
whether it be drug court or whatever means they had to, because he really wasn't going to do it probably on his own free will. So I took his mother to the clinic after the police, a little later that morning, and I had some stuff on I didn't know how the whole getting a protection order thing worked. So I thought maybe I might have to have some proof of why I needed a protection order, or thought I did. So I had made some copies of some text and things on my phone, and some messages that he had sent me that were kind of disturbing. And I ran off and left my phone at home. So I dropped Shelly off at the clinic, and she went in for her treatments. And I said, I'm going to run home, get my phone, and I'm going to come back and go to the police department and put in a protection order against them. So I went to I came home, and when I came home, I got out of the car and started walking up the drive, and see a wagon that I recognized. It was Brandon's. Brandon had a wagon that he'd pull around sometimes. He didn't really drive much, so he liked to stay in cities and places where he could get easy transportation. But his wagon was at my house. That's really bizarre. And being just hours before, he had made threats on my life. I didn't want to be put in a situation where I might have to hurt him, or he could possibly hurt me. So I thought the best thing to do was probably just call law enforcement and have him come out and check the house, as I didn't know, where, see if they could find where he was at, and let them deal with him. And so I called law enforcement. They came out and they did a sweep of the house and checked the property, and they couldn't find any sign of him. So the only thing was his wagon was there. So we thought that was kind of bizarre. So I get my phone, I go back to town, I go fill out the paperwork and everything for the protection order against Brandon. And I go back to pick up Shelly at the clinic later that afternoon. And then we had a few errands to run. And then it was probably like, what?
It was 4:45.
4:45 in the afternoon. We started heading home, and I was kind of watching the roads because, I knew he'd been out in that area. And when we got about a mile from our house, we saw Brandon walking toward our house. And he looked kind of upset and
Very angry.
kind of angry looking. And we just kind of slowed down. We didn't really stop, went on by. And I went up the road and I called law enforcement again, and was going to let them come out and see if they could, check him and see if, hoping maybe they could get at least a 72-hour involuntary commit or something, and check him out, because of he made threats early that morning against my life. So anyway, the law enforcement came out again, and it took them a little while to get out there, but Brandon was walking toward our house, and he was about a mile from our house. So we went on up the road, just like right near our driveway, pulled up in a neighbor's drive, kind of out of sight. And we were watching our driveway, and we were going to see if Brandon came walking up and went up our house to our driveway. And he never came walking by. He never walked by. He never went up our drive that we could see or anything, unless possibly he cut through the woods. But we never saw him, going up the road or anything. Police came out. They showed up. They supposedly drove the country roads around, several miles around my residence, and, kind of did some little bit of searching in the woods and, searching around my house, and they were unable to locate him. So no one saw him anymore. And then as far as we know, that was the last time anyone saw Brandon. But the story is a little bit more bizarre because when we got home, we went up to the house, and I had kind of assumed when I saw him walking back toward the house, he was coming back to get his wagon.
Yes, sir.
But when we got back to the house, the wagon was gone. I mean, this is a pretty rough terrain, wooded area. I mean, you could pull a wagon like that through the woods for a little ways, but you're going to wear out and be really, really tired. You're not going to make it very far, probably pulling it, trying to cross fences and everything else, loaded down with stuff. So anyway, we never found the wagon. We weren't sure what exactly happened to the wagon. I have some relatives that live out just up the road from me, and Brandon was seen like an hour or so before that we saw him, and he was pulling the wagon, supposedly walking back toward Fayetteville, about 2 miles from our house.
Okay.
So apparently he had already came up and got the wagon, taken it somewhere down the road, and then walked back, back up to our house, or was heading toward our house for whatever purpose, I don't know. And then like I said, the police checked it out. They couldn't find where he was. They couldn't find the wagon. He just kind of seemed to disappear without a trace. And then after a few days, the law enforcement contacted us, and they told us that Brandon was saw that day, and it was he had been encountered some police in Fayetteville about 20 miles away.
Okay.
And I guess we kind of made the assumption that it was after the time that we had saw him. And we thought, well, that's good because we know he at least made it back to Fayetteville. So he was, he got to Fayetteville, and we thought maybe he was going to be staying in some of the homeless shelters and everything. He had a court date coming up, so we were going to watch and see if he was made it to his court date and everything. At this point, we really weren't concerned that he was, that he was not, that we didn't know where he was at, because, he had made a couple of comments and threats, that we wouldn't see him anymore. And,
and then the next minute he tells us he loved us.
Yeah. I mean, he would send, we sent him a message or something, told him, we loved him and wanted to see if we could get together and have lunch with him or something. And he sent his mom a message and said, keep my name out of your mouth. And, the next time you see him talk to me, it'll be through my lawyers. And, I'll be getting a restraining order against you. And, just crazy stuff like that. And then like the next day he sent her a thing and said, Happy Mother's Day.
No, it was Mother's Day.
Yeah, it was a little bit
month.
later. Yeah. He sends her a thing, Happy Mother's Day. Sorry I couldn't get you a card. Love you, Mom. Just normal kind of stuff. But
so that day after y'all had saw him walking towards y'all's house, he was interaction with police in Fayetteville after that, correct? Not before?
No.
That was, come to find out. We'll see. We didn't actually file a missing persons report until like January of the next year.
Because court date kept
because we were kind of waiting to see, well, after like a month or month and a half or so, we kind of started getting concerned. Well, we haven't seen anything from Brandon, haven't heard anything from him, and so we were kind of, trying to do some checking around, calling some of his friends, checking places and see if anybody heard from him. And we couldn't find anybody that had any contact with him or anything. And then he was supposed to have a court date in October, I think, like October the 8th. And so we thought, well, we'll just wait till the court date and then see if he shows up for the court date, and then we'll know at least he's okay. So October the 8th drew near.
Of 2022, October 8th?
No,
of 2020.
2020. Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Same year.
So, October the 8th draws near, and then because of COVID, we find out that they had canceled the court date, and all those court things were postponed until January the following year. Okay. And then in January, so we thought, well, we'll just ride it out, because we still weren't sure whether, he was just didn't want to have anything to do with us and had separated himself, and if that's the case, if that's what he wants, then, we can deal with that. But, just the not knowing what's happened to him, and not any answers is kind of the hard part. But after, January came and he never showed up for his court date, then we started really getting concerned. So shortly after his court date in January, I went up and filed a missing persons report. And the police did some investigations and preliminary investigations, and came back and talked to us. They said, okay, we saw that he was kicked out of the Salvation Army in Fayetteville on December the 4th. And they said that, he was kicked out for violating curfew. Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so at least he was alive up until December the 4th. We knew. So that's kind of where we thought we were at. Well, this whole thing, they did multiple checks and contacted multiple people, supposedly. Never got any more information. Never heard anyone else seeing him or talking to him. Period. I mean, it's just like it said, he had vanished. But then later we go in and talk to the police again, and they're the detective, and he's going back and double checking all the stuff that he had checked before. So he goes back and double checks the Salvation Army December thing, and come to find out that was of 2019. He had been kicked out of the Salvation Army. Okay. In 2019. So it was a complete year before. So that threw everything back to the very last time that we could verify that anyone saw him was a mile from our house, walking toward our house. And after that, there has been no confirmed, that we know of, anybody has saw him, 100% sure.
All right. Now, and then so just a few questions on my end. Now, as far as once the police started working on that, I heard you mention he had made comments or maybe possibly sent messages on social media prior to this, right? That had caused concern. Has his Facebook or social media accounts, have they still stayed active? Do y'all know?
He still has a Facebook account. Mm-hmm. There's been no new post on the.
Yes, there had. There been his birthdays.
No new post by Brandon.
No.
That's what I'm saying. No, there's been no new post by Brandon after that date. There's been no new post by Brandon, but his Facebook has changed, and I'm, getting different stories and different, ideas on because sometimes certain things will be visible to us. And
Correct.
how you can go on and hide stuff from, then it'll change. And, a month later, we might look on there and, oh, this post is gone now. And then, 6 months later, it might show back up. So there's been, times where things seem to, his Facebook changes and we're thinking it's probably changes that either only Brandon could make or someone with his password could make, or, Facebook could possibly be making those changes or doing things, changing things. And I've, gotten different stories. Law enforcement initially told us that, oh yeah, Facebook is just updating their system and it causes things to do that. So then I've had other people tell me, no, that would never happen. That's absolutely doesn't happen. And if his Facebook is changing, then someone's doing it, either Brandon or someone with his password. But we're not sure, whether, what the accurate story is on that. So
as far as his cell phone, did he have a working cell phone at the time that y'all know of, or was it more for just like Wi-Fi type messaging?
He had a because of his incarceration.
You don't know about that.
And well, he had been busted with methamphetamines in September in 2019.
Yeah.
In September of 2019. And he was incarcerated for a while, for a few weeks, and
they released him.
But I'm not sure how long he was in jail.
Very long.
But anyway, they released him out, and and it was because of COVID. Supposedly, they let him out. But they gave him a wrist monitor thing that he wore on his wrist, and they gave him a cell phone that goes with it. And supposedly, at random times they would call him and say, hey, send us a selfie, of you with your holding your wrist monitor up so we can see you have your wrist monitor and where you're at and everything. And he kind of complied with that for a little while, and then eventually he cut the wrist monitor off. And the last time they called him and wanted him to send a picture with the wrist monitor, he had the wrist monitor off and was holding it up and took a picture of it.
Okay.
So and so he didn't really comply with the terms of his release, and that's kind of where he was at when it rolled into June of that year. He had been battling an ongoing methamphetamine problem, and maybe possibly other drugs too. I don't know. He stayed with his sister for a while, and we were totally shocked to find out he was shooting things up, and I guess that's methamphetamines. I don't know, but
so and I didn't mean to cut you off, but that was one of the things too, because that's what I specialized in. I was a narcotics investigator, and unfortunately around that same time frame, right around that 29. Well, I mean it's been around for a while, but around between 2018 and then once COVID hit, right around 2020, and everybody's at home, that's when you started to see fentanyl start getting introduced like really bad. Being mixed in with things. And again, I'm not saying I hope nothing but the best. I hope that maybe possibly he is somewhere out there floating around, just whether he's been hiding, he's in a rehab somewhere, he's at a shelter somewhere, something like that. Hopefully somebody see that. If not, that's the only thing not the only thing, but that's one of the things that I always, because unfortunately a lot of the cases that we run into or that I'm working, when they do involve drugs or there's a drug history there, it's usually methamphetamine or heroin. And then what ends up happening around the same time frame with these cases is, if they show up missing, it's because they got a hold of some drugs that were laced with that fentanyl. And it may not have been anything intentional, but again, it is the drug world, right? So you just never know. And then they get a hold of that, whether they're with somebody, and usually not all, but a vast majority of those crowds that you run around in that are all partaking in those drugs, you would think, like, when your mind's clear, it's like, okay, if something happens to somebody, I'm gonna call 911, get them help, get them out here. Unfortunately, the thing that worries me the most, like I was saying, was if he was with somebody that they were partaking in drug use like that, if it was laced, it could have been in a situation where it was an overdose and somebody got scared and left him somewhere, or he was by himself, because it sounds like he was pretty transient and he traveled around all over the place, right?
He did it mostly on foot, and he took a lot of Ubers.
Yeah. When he had money, he might pay somebody for a ride, but a lot of times he was resorted to, he had to walk or
was he staying primarily in Arkansas, or was he going over to like Texas? He's going to Oklahoma? He going anywhere like that?
He primarily stayed in Arkansas. I mean, there was a few times that he left the state just to, I think a few years back he took off and went to California
That's been years ago.
to stay with his friend Kat and tried to live out there for a while. But after a few months, he decided he didn't like it in San Diego, and was calling me, and I had to get him a bus ticket home.
Yeah.
I got him a bus ticket home, and he came back here, and he left a few times, but he always came back to Arkansas. He never was away very long, so I think he kind of felt Fayetteville was his home. That's where he stayed, and he worked in the food service industry a lot, and he worked in Mitty's Garage and several other restaurants, and he really enjoyed doing it, and I guess did pretty good at it until I think. When he started getting into the drugs, it started affecting his work relationships with the people he was working with, and he got to be unreliable and unpredictable and just acting bizarre. So they ended up letting him go, and then several people that we'd spoken to said that Brandon would say, hey, so they'd be friends with Brandon for several years, and then all of a sudden he's knocking on their door saying, hey, I need a place to stay for a couple of nights. Can I crash on your couch? And they say, sure. And then they say, after a couple of days, they'd say, look, Brandon, we love you and everything. And we try to help you, but man, you can't stay here, because he'd just be crazy acting, talking to himself and, just doing really bizarre things.
Was he diagnosed with any kind of mental health disorders beforehand? Like, did he have anxiety, depression, anything that was like diagnosed or that y'all knew he was dealing with?
When he was really, my other son has ADHD, and he is a very good worker.
Mm-hmm.
He gets tired of something, he gets another job.
Yeah.
He's a really hard worker, and he don't sit down.
Yeah.
But Brandon wasn't the hyper. They said he had ADD.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't understand the difference in that too much.
Mm-hmm.
It's been years since I had to deal with that.
Yeah.
But Brandon's a very, very intelligent young man, and he has been since he was little.
Mm-hmm.
He's always been on the honor roll, and he is.
Yeah, when he was like in junior high, he was reading at a college level, and he read a good number of the books in the library at the little school where he went to, and he had like they'd give him points for reading books, and he had like the highest points of anybody in the school that I think that had ever up to that point. I don't know if anybody, but he was an avid reader, loved to read lots of things, especially sci-fi kind of mystery, fantasy sci-fi stuff. But he loved music. He loved to do karaoke. He hung around karaoke bars a lot. He did a little bit of. He wanted to be a bartender.
Mm-hmm.
He in the restaurants and things he worked for. He worked what they call back bar, I guess. I'm not sure what exactly that is, but he did that and would kind of fill in for the bartenders sometimes if they had to leave for a while, or if they couldn't get anybody on a certain night, he would do that. But he'd always kind of talked about he wanted to get to where he would be a bartender somewhere. So, that was his dream job.
When the police started investigating everything, did they go back through? And again, I'm not sure exactly, and I don't want y'all to tell us, but in relation to y'all's house, to the path that he would have been taken to get back, was there any kind of store, anywhere that would have had either security camera footage, doorbell camera footage, anything like that could have been checked, or no? It's pretty remote.
We live in a really rural area. Mm-hmm. We're about 20 miles out of Fayetteville, and I mean, there's probably between our house and the mile that that he would have had to walk to get to our house, or there's probably maybe a couple of houses.
Yes, sir.
And the probably don't have security cameras. I mean, I haven't checked with them to see for sure. but they also set a distance from the road, so it might be, and then plus, the woods and the trees and everything around. So
it is a pretty wooded area then, correct?
yeah, I mean, wooded pastures, it's farmland, these like farmers with their cows, and you'll be driving down the road and there'll be fences on both sides and pastures, and then, and then occasionally spots of wooded areas.
I know it had been a while, or there was a little gap there between the time y'all had saw him and then when he was reported missing, which, and I understand completely why y'all did that. But do you know if before that, like when they were coming out and looking for him and things like that, did they, at any point in time, did they ever try to track? Was there any dogs used basically from that location? Anything? Drones flown, anything at all to look for him like that you know that they did?
As far as I know, there was never drones. This last
December
Mhm.
2022.
2022 this year. We
Last year.
finally got them to get some dogs out. We kind of kept asking them, could they try to bring some cadaver dogs out or something?
Yes.
Because that was kind of when we initially heard what had happened to Brandon. We thought, well, he had made it back to Fayetteville, so that kind of put him at 20 miles away. So we had no reason to believe necessarily that he would be in our local woods
Correct,
running around
yes.
the house. So, but then after that story kind of got changed on us, the police went back and dug a little deeper and, corrected their records and found out that the last time Brandon was, well, the deal with the Salvation Army actually occurred in 2019 instead of 2020. That put the last time that anyone saw him out there near us. So that got us to thinking, well, did he have some drugs in his pocket, like you said, fentanyl stuff, and maybe decide he was going to, tired and hot and disgusted and whatever, and was going to go, off in the woods 100 yards and sit down and,
Yes,
do a little bit of drugs, and then, got some bad stuff, like you said, and then, is deceased laying there. But the thing about it is the area exactly where we saw him there is a floodplain.
Yeah.
And we gets a lot of flood, and there's been several floods since then. So there was actually a lady that lost her life, just maybe 100 yards from where he was at, because her car stalled out during flood water, and right there on that road, she was swept off the road and, drowned.
Yes, sir.
So that's an area where, if he had just crawled off the road a little ways, done some drugs or something, and then died there, his body could be swept, downstream. And I don't know if you'd ever be able to find it, because those waters churning around and bones get deposited on the bottom of the creeks, and, things wash over the top of them, and, who knows where.
Yes, sir. On that roadway, is there anywhere like an overpass? I know you said that flood zone area, but is there anywhere that's got like even just a bit of a drop off underneath near some drains or anything? Because what I'm getting at is I would love to know where that wagon is too, right? Like, so I feel like you could locate the wagon.
We're trying to find the wagon.
If you could locate the wagon, I don't think he's going to be far from it, because like you said, he's not driving, he's not doing anything. That's basically his lifeline. I'm sure everything that he had of value, or at least definitely of value to him, was associated with that wagon. And I don't think that would be far from wherever he is at.
And then the thing about it was he was seen probably an hour earlier pulling the wagon back toward Fayetteville, but he was still, probably 17 miles from town. So he didn't have time to pull that all the way to town or pull it somewhere, and then he was seen an hour later walking back toward our house, about where he was saw pulling the wagon heading back toward Fayetteville was about 2 miles from our house. And then when we saw him, he was heading back toward our house about a mile from our house.
Yeah. So somewhere right in between there, I would think that he had found, or not necessarily found, but he knew of somewhere to where it was semi-safe, kind of off the road.
Either that or somebody came by. There was at that time, the day that we saw him, there was a white truck parked down by the little creek, because that's where they said they had saw Brandon, my cousin and neighbor, that had saw Brandon pulling his wagon back toward town. They saw him right down near, there's a little creek called Sweetwater Branch down there, and he was down near that little creek. And there was when we came through, there was a white truck, and I didn't didn't even know we were going to encounter Brandon at that point. So I didn't really make much notation of the model or year or anything. I just recall it being a white truck with two people in it, and the wife says it was a male and a female. And
well, I paid, and some reason I just paid more attention.
That's fine. No, I understand.
And they were parked in there backwards.
Was backed in.
It was backed in by the bridge, and the guy was out in the back end. They had a camper on it, and he closed it down real fast. Hopped in the car with the lady driver, and I could tell you he's blonde, and lady was kind of color of a light brown. But
Okay.
I most of the time I don't pay attention.
I mean, he could have been somebody down there fishing. It might have been absolutely nothing, or he could have been. We kind of wondered if he might have, Brandon might have knew somebody that, came and picked up his wagon, because we posted posters out all around this area, and, we've got, quite a bit of views and people that, neighbors and stuff that have kind of been looking around, and no one has been able to spot his wagon or find his wagon. So that is kind of a mystery that we think, it would be at least interesting to know what became of that wagon, because it's you'd think it would have to be around here close somewhere.
Yes, sir. And again, I don't know anything. Again, I'm going strictly off of what I would use or did use in numerous different types of investigation. Like I try, and there's a lot of different things people try to tell you, well, you could do this, you could do that, but it's usually always just the simple things. So at this point, just going off of what I've heard y'all talk about, there's really no reason to think that he's super far away, that he didn't get on a bus, he's not, didn't get a plane ticket out of there somewhere. He's on a different part of the country. The last place that he was confirmed seen was realistically right at a mile away from y'all's house, correct?
Yes,
and then when y'all saw him, or not y'all, but the neighbor that had saw them, it was about 2 miles from y'all's house with the wagon, right?
Yeah, and that was about an hour before we saw him.
Okay.
So,
and then you got to think too, if you're walking, you're pulling a wagon, or you're just walking in general, you're probably within an hour. I'd say you're doing, I don't know, the average pace. I'd say maybe 3 miles max.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, about 3 miles an hour. So, he wouldn't have been able to pull that wagon very far and had time to get back there, within an hour to be, there where we saw him. So, I mean, unless he had help stashing that wagon, you would think, somebody might have picked it up. He might have, because he was born and raised out in this area, and went to school with a lot of people, and it's totally possible maybe somebody he knew drove by in a truck or something. He said, "Hey, can you take my wagon on into town or something?" And,
yeah, I doubt that.
But nobody's came forward and said anything like that's happened or anything, and it's pretty well publicized around our area about him being missing. So unless they were intentionally trying to hide, the wagon or something, I see no reason for it to be, still missing. It's kind of a mystery to me as to why we can't find that wagon.
Yes, sir. And I do, and I truly do. I think with that, I mean, the vast majority of discoveries are usually, unless there's foul play involved, are right within a 5 mile radius, right?
Right.
So I would be willing to bet, and again, I'm not saying that we won't come out there. It's just at this point in time, it'll probably be at least a month or two before we could get out there. But that, just the road name itself, if you took that and then pulled up on Google Earth and basically just did a 5 mile radius around that, now obviously where the houses are, that's not going to, that won't have to be looked at. But right there off the roadway or somewhere, I mean, because you got to think too, we're talking probably, I mean, a decent sized wagon, but not anything huge. So it wouldn't have to be somewhere massive to store this thing yet, or to hide it off the side of the road. Just so he's like, all right, well, I'm not dragging this anymore. I'm going to drop it off on the side of the road, walk back to my parents' house. If somebody didn't come and pick it up, like you said, but him being born and raised there, I'm sure he's walked that road a million different times. He would have known of somewhere like that to where he could have put it. I believe, right? That's what I would have done. If I was going to have to walk back, I'm in the middle of the summer. It's already going to be hot. I'm not trying to drag that. And it's Arkansas. So it's just like, God almighty hot, So that's what I would think. I would try to make a radius there, go back and kind of retrace it. And again, I know there's different things that play into factor. Like, yes, it's been an amount of time. There's floodplains that could have pushed it down, things like that. But I'd really truly believe that within there, if something has happened, if he is no longer with us, that I don't think that he would be far from there at all. Now, and again, I hope that's not the case. I hope that he's alive and well and living his best life.
We hope he's kind of pulled himself together and he's, sitting on a beach somewhere enjoying himself or something,
Yes,
And one of these days we'll get a call from him and then we'll have some words about why he put us through this, but it'll be all right. But I don't know if that's going to happen.
Yes, sir. And like I said, I try to give people as much hope as possible, but I'm also a realist. But I also do know, I mean, you can go back and look. There was one family in particular right here out of South Carolina that we dealt with, and they thought for close to a year that their daughter had passed away, and they were looking for the body. And then she saw the video and reached out to them because of that. So that's always best case scenario. But in the worst case scenario of trying to help, that's where we come in too, right? So I mean, not only do I try to talk to you and use the platform basically to allow y'all to get the story out there, because if somebody did see something or somebody heard something, or if somebody's closer obviously to Arkansas than what I am at the moment, they can be like, all right, you know what, it's not going to be that hard. We can take a drone, and instead of having people on foot go through and clear the wooded areas, you could send one up with a thermal camera, and if it picked up signatures off of a wagon, whether it's if it was rusted down to the frame or something like that, it'd pick up. And if you locate that wagon, that's going to put you leaps and bounds ahead of where we're at right now, right? So that's best case scenario. That's what I'm hoping takes place. And the more people that see it, the more people that be willing to do that. And there's different organizations, especially closer to that as well, like Texas EquiSearch, right? So that's the thing. I'm not here trying to say I want credit for anything. I told you from the very beginning, the only thing I want is anybody that I know that I could think of to try to help y'all out even more so to get these answers. I'll do that. And I think this would be one, because I have talked to Texas EquiSearch before, and I've got their number, so I would be willing as well to pass this information along to them. I don't know if y'all talked to them, if y'all heard from them, anything like that, but they're really good at what they do. And
I have heard about them through another lady, and you have to get the police department to work with them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard in Arkansas to get them to work with them.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
It's a hard thing to get.
Yeah. All right. Well, and unfortunately, that does happen some places too, because some departments we work with, they're super jam up, they're super cool. That's where we are a little bit different. We don't have to be requested by law enforcement. But I mean, if Arkansas is kind of difficult to work with,
it is.
There's not much I can help them out with there. But again, if you've got some kind of like private entity that specializes in drones, and it doesn't even have to be specifically for like a search and recovery or search and rescue type thing. It can be something as simple as maybe somebody out of Fayetteville that uses drones to shoot for like weddings or something. It only takes the drone and somebody that's capable of using it to get it up there. And again, I'm not saying that that's going to 100% happen. It's just these are the kinds of things that obviously the sooner they happen, the better. But then
probably something like that would be better done in the winter, the fall. Is that correct? Because of the foliage on the trees and things.
It would, yes, sir. And it just really all depends, because there could also be too something as simple as maybe an old roadway, maybe an old bridge overpass that maybe y'all didn't know about, that maybe like a bunch of teenagers or people that used to hang out there, somewhere he knew of from a kid, from being from that area, that they used to go kind of hang out at. Maybe he knew it was there in that area, kind of close. An old rundown like house, anything. Maybe, that could be somewhere they could kind of hid out or camped out or something like that, that maybe picked up like that nobody ever knew about. And then you go and check, and his belongings may be right there. You never know. You never know. But
we had we were hoping that maybe we would be able to track him through some of his financial records and things, and part of what kind of precipitated his disappearance, I guess, is he was there for a while. He was really broke and didn't have any money, and so he was homeless for a stint, and then he went and lived with his sister. But because he was broke, I think that kind of actually helped him kind of sober up, I guess, that's what you want to call it, or dry out or whatever. Yes. Because he didn't have money to buy drugs with, And then I guess he got, right before he went missing, he got a stimulus check.
Mm.
And, then he started, that's the first thing he wanted. He told his sister when he got the stimulus check, he said, I just want to go get a hotel room and get some drugs. And, I just want to party,
Yeah.
and he did that for, a few days. And I loaned him some money and some things. And I told the wife, and I told his sister too, I said, I'm not really concerned about the money, but I said, when he gets his stimulus check back, if I see he's just taking it out and being stupid with it and buying drugs and stuff, I'm going to ask him to pay me back the money he owes me, because I might as well back than to see him use it to hurt himself. So whenever he got the stimulus money back, I kind of hit him up for the money he owed me, and he got really angry at me, and said that I knew that he couldn't pay me right now because I kept having people steal his ID from him, and just more of his bizarre stuff.
Yeah.
That I was he was convinced that I had Hollywood actors and judges and everybody working for me. I guess I must have a lot of money to be able to pay all those people. But
the thing of it is too, excuse me, he pops off in these times and says, if I come up dead, look at my dad. If I come up suicide, look at my dad. I have listened to this 3-hour rant, or just things that Brandon is writing a book, maybe. Or it's a 3-hour him talking.
Something he posted on Facebook was an audio.
Okay.
And kind of find out all this stuff that he's blaming us for, me and his dad and the rest of our family, and in the Hollywood and the police and courts, all that's coming from his brain.
Yes, ma'am.
And I didn't realize, I thought he was blaming us. I mean, literally thinking we've done this stuff. I would never do that to my son. Ever.
Well, no, ma'am. And like I said, I've talked to a lot of people. I've met a lot of good people. I've met a lot of bad people. And I can tell that obviously that y'all do care for your son. You don't want anything bad happen to him. Y'all would never do anything for him. So I hope that you do take some solace in, and again, I know we're complete strangers, but just within the first 5 minutes of talking to y'all, I know y'all want nothing more than the best for your son or any child that you have. So, but that's the thing. And it's so hard for people to understand that have never experienced it. Again, yes, I know as far as drug usage, that's a choice, right? People make that choice. Yeah. But the mental health side of things, that, you have no idea. And nobody does what the person next to them is going through. And sometimes a lot of family members, they get caught off guard by that, and they wonder, it's like, well, what could I have done different? What could I have done? And there's nothing you could do. One of my best friends committed suicide that I was in the Marine Corps with, and I had absolutely zero clue, and I beat myself up over it all the time. But there's just, at the end of the day, you got to be truthful. So you did everything, or both of y'all did everything that you could to provide the best life that you could for your son, right? You wanted nothing but the best for him.
But it gives the manual. But he's given us nothing to help raise him. We did the best we could.
Exactly. And I'm not telling you that just to try to make you feel, I'm telling you the truth. And I think obviously y'all have been through the worst, and not just y'all, but everybody that was close to him, y'all are going through one of the worst things that any human being could go through. And like I said, that's why what I do is so important to me, is because it truly does help people. And I wish that I could help everybody get those exact answers that we, that you're wanting. And sometimes we can, and then sometimes it's a process. Sometimes it's a little drawn out. Maybe there's somebody that just the smallest little thing that's watching this is going to reach out to y'all. I don't care if they reach out to me, to y'all, to whoever, and you get closure on that, right? That's the only reason I do this for. But I don't, and I truly do mean that, though. I hope, like, y'all have been going through this, and yes, he was the one that was having the mental health issues, and yes, he was the one that was having, problems with dealing with drugs. But this is the part people don't see, is the family members that are left behind, the pain, struggle, and and y'all start to play these same things over in your head. It's like, well, in the beginning, it's like, well, I would have never done that, but now you start questioning. It's like, well, mate, you start looking at things differently, and you're like, well, maybe I did do this, maybe I didn't, and that's not the case. So I hope y'all don't think that. It truly is. Mental health is something that people have no idea until it affects them what a big deal it is. And then again, what like we said, during COVID time frame, you've got everybody secluded. You've got drug usage just goes tenfold, suicide goes up tenfold, and then you combine drug usage being laced with fentanyl, especially if they're using it intravenously. You go back through and you look at overdoses. Like, it was to the point during COVID, like, yeah, they wanted everybody to get a vaccine, but they were also handing out Narcan like crazy because everybody was overdosing. Like, it was expected. And, it was just a bad time frame. I mean, I'm not blaming it. I'm not saying it's all COVID, all this other stuff, but that same time frame, if you go back and look statistically, there's a ton more cases just like this, right? Because of all the time people spent by themselves, these issues just got worse and worse and worse. And a lot of these programs that they did have closed down, and they were just kicked back out. Deal with it on your own. And some people, that's okay. They can deal with that. Not everybody can. And I think this may just be one of those things to where if something did happen to them, I think it was just, unfortunately, I think the mental weight of everything that was going on, the interaction with law enforcement, him thinking people were out to get him, that the drug usage, yes, do I believe there were some mental health issues there underlying? Yes, but I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to diagnose that. But I do know that if those issues were there, mixed in with copious amounts of drug usage, that not only is he dealing with the mental health aspect, but then he's going into a psychosis that's basically been brought on by the drug usage. Right. And once he starts talking about people are out to get him, his own family's after him, you got the government listening, all those paranoia type things. I mean, that's telltale signs of that.
Yeah. Well, we think, that we were hoping that the law enforcement could track him through his bank accounts and through, but as far as we know, from what we know of that law enforcement's done, there has been zero activity on any financial thing. He was on Medicaid. He hasn't used his Medicaid. He took medicines that he probably should have, that he really needed to take. He hasn't gotten those filled anytime anywhere in the state of Arkansas.
On the bank records, did he have? I know you said the one stimulus check, but were any of the other ones deposited?
So they were deposited because he would frequently use our address. He would use that as his address, so we would get his mail a lot of times, and I was all the time, sending him a message and say, hey, I got this piece of mail, and I'd typically take a picture of it with my camera and send it to him in Facebook Messenger, because you never knew whether he was going to actually have where I could text him the images. So Facebook Messenger would work because he could get it on Wi-Fi. So I would send it to him, and then he'd say, oh yeah, that's nothing, throw it away, or and he would do that sort of thing. But he had an Emerald account that was set up through H&R Block, who'd done his taxes, and the first stimulus check that he got, he had, because he had used that Emerald account to process his tax refund, they automatically put that money back into that same account where he had, where his tax refund had went. Well, when he spent the tax refund, he kind of threw the card away because it was a debit card with, that amount of funds in there, and he didn't need it anymore. Well, then when the government deposited that money back in that account, I had to help him get his because he had lost. He was terrible about losing his IDs and all kind of things, and he had lost his ID, lost his Emerald card, or threw it away, one or the other. And so I had to help him order a birth certificate for him, and then took him to H&R Block, and he had to contact the bank, and went through this whole process, and he was able to get that Emerald card back. And then that's when that kind of precipitated his big downfall here, because he had access to that stimulus money. And from what I understand, from a correspondence we received in the mail from the government, that there has been additional funds deposited into that account. And as far as we know, he hasn't accessed them. The police are in the process, from what we understand. Before we would ask them about it, and they'd say, well, we ran his credit report. and we didn't see anything on his credit report. And I'm like, well, credit report's not really going to tell you. So we kind of pressed them a little bit harder, and they finally agreed to. And they said it was kind of a nightmare to do it, but they said they agreed to actually subpoena the account records, for his bank account, the Emerald account that he had.
Well, I had proof that he got another check in 2021.
So hopefully before long, we will find out whether any of those funds have been accessed, because, somebody that has mental health issues, is homeless, has drug problems, and if they have any way possible they can have access to those funds, they're going to be getting them.
100%. Yes.
He's gonna be going after those funds. So if we see that those funds haven't been accessed or no attempts have been made to access them, well, that's kind of telling in and of itself. But so we're hoping that'll provide some additional answers, and we'll still wait to see.
What about the social media stuff? Did they get the search warrants for Facebook?
Yeah, they're redoing it again because we told them his Facebook keeps on different things.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's kind of, they'd say, yeah, we checked it, we looked at it, we checked it out, but they didn't really tell us. We actually subpoenaed, records, and did this, did that,
Well, Detective Zacharias told me that they are.
So I think after
looking at
we have kind of been pressing them a little harder, a little bit more, that they are going back and they are actually subpoenaing some of this information. And so we're hoping that, more information will be coming out before too long, and we could see if, in fact, his Facebook account's being manipulated by somebody else, or if it's just through, because of things that Facebook is doing, update their system, because they've been changing over to Meta and all that other stuff.
Yes,
so
sir.
There's been some people are saying, well, that can just happen because they updated some settings or something. But I don't know. That doesn't seem to make sense to me. But
yeah, well, I can tell you, when they pull the search warrant for whether it be the bank records, phone records, whatever, when they pull the search warrant for the Facebook data, and it'll pull up, I do think that that's going to be a super important thing too, is his messenger details. That I definitely think, because that sounds the way that he was using mostly to communicate with people, and that will put you at least 3 or 4 people that he was last in contact with. And that's usually, like I said, you follow the simplest of stuff. So between the banking records, the Facebook Messenger records, and then also, if the phone was working, whether it be on Wi-Fi or not, but if there's phone records out there too, have them pulled up, have the phone ping data pulled up, anything like that, and then all that does is just paint that picture of where he possibly could be or was.
Tell him about the phone.
Well, we had, it was probably, I think it was in October, November.
It was September.
After Brandon got me. You think it was September? Well, I'm not exactly sure, but it was a little while after Brandon had gone missing, and we were, at that point concerned about him, and we hadn't seen him in a while, but we still hadn't turned him in as missing to the police. And I remember one day my mother came over to visit, and she asked, she said, have y'all heard anything from Brandon? Have y'all been able to find out anything about it? I said, no, we're still looking for him, and trying to contact friends and stuff, but we haven't been able to find anybody that knows anything. And while she was here, I got a phone call on my phone, and I looked at it, and it had Brandon's picture. It pops up, and so showed I was getting a call from Brandon. So I answer it, and it's a female, and said hello, and she says hello, and I said, yeah, I said, you're calling me. This is my son's phone. I said, who are you, and why are you calling from my son's phone? And she said, oh no, this is my dad's phone. And she said that her dad was a homeless man that lived in Fayetteville, and he had passed away, and this phone was in his belongings, and that that she was basically calling people that were in the contact list to tell them, that her dad had passed away, kind of informing his friends and stuff that so she had saw my number in there, and so she gave me a call, and I thought, that's kind of really odd and bizarre. But I apologized, that her dad had passed away, and offered condolences, and I kind of wrote it off as Brandon would frequently call me from people's, because he was all the time losing his phones,
Mm.
and he couldn't afford to buy he would buy the cards, that you reload the phones, and he wouldn't be able to afford to buy a card or whatever. So he was all the time calling me from different numbers, and a lot of times I would just write it down as Brandon in my contacts. So even if it wasn't necessarily his number, I could call back and get a hold of somebody that might know where he was at.
Mm.
So I just kind of attributed it to I had noted it as a contact number for Brandon, and that's the reason it popped back up. And I just kind of let it go. And she said her name. Oddly enough, she said her dad's name was John Smith. That's kind of sounds a little bit. I guess there are John Smiths out there, probably a lot of them, but it just kind of seemed odd that.
Yeah, seemed made up.
Yeah, seemed like a made up name. But anyway, didn't think much about it. Then a couple of days later, I went to grab my phone out of my pocket and I bumped it or something. And I was kind of butt dialing somebody, and I looked down, and I was redialing that number, and it was Brandon's picture again popped back up there. And I just said, well, I'm just going to let it ring and listen to it. And it goes to voicemail, and it's my son's voice. It says, "Hi, you've reached the phone of Brandon Barron," in my son's voice. And I'm like, wait a minute, if this was her dad's phone, why is my son's voicemail on her dad's phone? So I don't know. We not sure what to make of that, but we did find out through law enforcement. Apparently, there are these kiosks and things that are set up around Walmarts and places like that where you can sell phones, and they supposedly have Brandon on pictures of him at these kiosks selling phones.
They sell that one.
So we're thinking that a lot of those times that he had told us that he'd lost his phone or something, he had actually sold it probably for drug money, when he was hurting for money or something. So he was selling phones. So, but that phone, for whatever reason, he might have sold it to this homeless guy, or, he could have, he told us he had his stuff stolen a couple of different times. So possibly the homeless guy stole it from him. I'm not sure how that
let me tell what
came out. So.
What the police told us about that phone.
Okay.
I remember things and he don't remember things.
That's perfectly fine.
He told us that he went back in that phone, the police officer. He said he hadn't been used since June, the day that he threatened his dad's life.
Mm-hmm.
And then the only time it had been used was that day that lady called, and it had been used ever since.
So that was the same phone that he had made the post about what he was stuff with the father. All right, now and I know this sounds crazy too, but the lady, and y'all don't have to tell me. I don't want to be responsible.
I've been there before because he made the threats the day before.
Yeah, but if y'all had her information and stuff, or when y'all talked to her, do y'all think that it was possible to get back in touch with her?
We tried to call the number back, because that's the only. She called us on Brandon's phone, and then we tried to call it back, and she never answered. And I don't recall really getting a name from her. She just told us that that was her dad's phone, and I did recall that she said her dad's name was John Smith, which was kind of bizarre. And then we're not sure, but Brandon, when he had gotten in trouble with the law, was in jail. He listed as supposedly listed on his jail papers as a contact. Well, this is what we've been told, and we haven't verified this really, but we had told that he had listed someone on as a contact on his jail papers, Wendy Smith.
Yeah. Okay.
But so I don't even know if that's true or not.
We're not. This is just some hearsay stuff that we've heard. So if this Wendy Smith may be the daughter of John Smith that was the homeless guy, or if they're somehow connected, I don't know.
Well, I know that without a doubt, when people watch this, if they know of a Wendy Smith that had a father named John Smith, she will be in touch. I can assure you of that much. Because there's also a way, and that's why I was asking about him, as far as John Smith, that's his name, going back and basically checking the public index records of like death records, and then going through and looking at that, and then go through like property tax records and see who family members and things like that. So there are ways to find that out, and I don't have a problem looking that up either if I could find that, right? Because if I could find that and at least put y'all in contact where you could be like, hey, do you still happen to have this phone by chance? Again, I know that's a long shot, but even if she did, the physical phone itself is a lot better than just the data that they could pull, right? Like that would be one piece or one more piece of something that you didn't have in the past.
Right.
Because that phone itself, if it had, like if he had sold phones in those refurbishing machines, right? You put them in and it gives you X amount of dollars for, depending on what type of phone it is. You put them in there, it gives you a gift card or to give you the cash out, whatever. People can trade those, but it goes through, once they get it, they take them and they wipe all data off of those. So like the voicemail and all that other stuff, that's part of the instructions on that. You got to clear that out. So that phone itself was either, traded or stolen. Either way, it was used 1, if not 2 days prior to the last time that your son was seen. So I would be very curious to know how that phone came about into somebody else's possession. To me, that's the one thing I'd want to know.
Yeah, that night that we had the police out here at 5 o'clock in the morning. At 3 o'clock, there's a homeless camp behind Walmart. But our son was in Walmart doing some weird things. I guess he was really having an issue, so the police went there.
Acting very bizarre.
Yeah, in Walmart. And by 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock, they were knocking on our door because he's ready to kill us. To kill his dad.
That was part of the when they were saying, well, Brandon saw it like 3 or 4 o'clock. They didn't tell us it was it was AM instead of PM.
Yes.
So we thought he was seen just a few hours before, or possibly even after. Like the 3 or 4 AM was, I guess, what technically been the next day. But so we didn't really understand that it was before. So it turned out not to be something that necessarily helped us narrow down where he would be.
Now with his case, like the actual police report and things like that, now I get it. He's still listed under the missing status and all that other stuff. But as far as like Freedom of Information Act requests, have y'all submitted any of those and gotten any information or no?
Yes, I submitted some stuff. And they will not give me anything pertaining to their current investigation that they're doing. They say it's an ongoing investigation. They're not going to disclose anything like that. But, they did give us some old police records, things that his old arrest and stuff like that. So
actually, the day that he came up missing, at 3 o'clock in the morning, that's in there too.
Okay. So all of that stuff's in there. Well, that's kind of, and again, I'm just going through racking my brain trying to think. But for me, that's what I think the biggest things that you could benefit from are, number one, finding out who that girl was and being able to speak to her again, right? Like I think that's going to be a big thing as far as the phone, because she may not have the phone, right? The phone may be long gone, might have been thrown in the trash, whatever. But her father, maybe he was part of that homeless community. Maybe he knew something. Maybe he had something. Maybe she knew something, or when she retrieved those belongings, maybe that wagon was there. Something. Maybe it may be nothing, but it may be something. You don't know.
Exactly.
I definitely think that needs to be tracked down. And like I said, I'll look into that too. But and again, once people start watching this, then it'll start. That's the good thing about it. And that's why I say I don't do any of the private investigation stuff, because I don't want anybody to think I'm out to get anybody, right? Like I'm not trying to do anything bad, negative. The only thing I care about is getting the answers for families like y'all. And if the loved one is passed, bringing them back home, or even if they're alive, bringing them back home. So I think as far as finding out who she is and getting in contact with her, I think that's a big deal. I think obviously law enforcement, if they've said they've already done it, that's good. But this is also good too, because now basically it'll be public that they have said that they were going to do these things. So that holds them accountable. And again, as far as law enforcement, I'm 100% pro police, right? And I'll do anything I can to help them. But I'm also, my main objective is to help y'all as a family, right? So I know how the game works with law enforcement. You got some really good ones, you got some really lazy ones, and then I have no use for somebody that's going to be lazy, right? Like their sole purpose, their sole job is to help y'all, and if they're not doing it, I don't want to hear about excuses. So that's just me. That's just my opinion.
Well, the Washington County Police Department has been Sheriff's Department. Okay. So we only had one investigator. In the past year we've had two. And with two of them working, they're doing all they can, and I have no problem.
They kind of we recently had a sheriff change, a different sheriff, and seems like I'm not trying to denigrate the sheriff or anything like that, but it seems like the new sheriff, he's been posting some things on their social media about missing and Brandon being missing, and so they're helping to get that out there. With the older sheriff didn't do any of that sort of thing. And then also, we actually have a meeting tomorrow. We're going to go talk to the sheriff in person. So,
well, that's great, and that's great news. And that's what I'm saying. I obviously some new blood came in. He stirred it up. He's getting more attention drawn to it, and that's exactly what you want, right? And again, like I said, I know there is a ton of good police out there. I know there's a ton of good sheriffs out there. But there's also some that are like, if it wasn't for people being lazy, I wouldn't have anything to do. You know what I mean? So again, not every circumstance is like that, but a vast majority of them, that's why people reach out to me, just because they're not getting that attention. And then it's crazy how it works is once you have like 10, 15, 20, 30,000 people start looking into something, then that's when people are like, oh, you know what? We're going to start looking into that. And that's what I want. It's not to make anybody look bad. It's just to, at the end of the day, the only thing I care about is y'all getting answers. Yeah, and it works. It works.
The thing of it is too, we are having to be our investigator. Everybody out here is having, and it's because somebody missing. They're the investigator. We have to fight for our own. But detective, when they come out here in December, he would come in the house and talk to us after they done the search. And they only went to a certain length, and I needed to go further, but that's when everything washes away. And he told me, he said, this is it, until you have proof that your son is out there, he's coming.
Yes, ma'am. I hate that for you. Okay, I don't want you to get upset. I know it's a super terrible thing, but I understand. Okay, so I'm going to do everything that I can to help y'all out, just like I said. And again, I'm not saying that we will not come out there and search and all this other stuff, right? I know there's a lot that goes into that. We've been all over the place, all over the United States. But as of right now, that's what I'm going to do. As soon as we get off of here, I'm going to put this together. I'm going to get it put up. That way, obviously me seeing it, my eyes are good, but we get 100,000 something people to see it. That's going to be even better, right? And that's just to bring awareness. And I wished I could. I wished I could just get it out there to everybody and their grandma to see it, right? But it only takes one person coming forward, like I said, with something super small, and I'll do everything we can. But that's what I'm gonna do. So when we get off here, I'm gonna get the video put together. I'm gonna get it posted, and then I'm gonna start looking and try to see if I can figure out who this old Wendy Smith is. It may not be a Wendy Smith, I know that, but
I don't even know.
Yeah. But if it was a John Smith, I'll go back, I'll track it down, I'll find the records. If there was somebody there, like, again, that's a pretty common name and one used for aliases, right? But if something's there, somebody had that phone, so I want to know who that was. But is there anything at all right now other than that y'all need from me or that I could help y'all with?
I can't think of anything.
No.
Appreciate you and your platform, and being a voice to help people. That's awesome.
And thank you for your service too.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate all that. And like I said, y'all don't have to worry about anything. It never in any point, if I'm the only one, I'm the sole owner, operator, and there's another guy, John, that helps me or does his podcast stuff for us too. But if anybody else ever reaches out to you and says they're associated with Loudwater Outfitters, that's not true. Okay, I'm just letting you know now. It is just me. And unfortunately, there are some people that try to come out and say, "Oh, I'm with such and such." That's not true.
Yeah.
If it's not me or that Palmetto Sleuth, I have no idea who it is and have nothing to do with them. Okay. And I only say that just because I don't want y'all to get anybody to make y'all think something else, right? Because like you said, there are people out there with bad intentions.
Yeah, every time we have something posted or news, or we're getting scam calls, and finally we just hang up on them
Yes.
or just
Yeah.
delete their messages and stuff because we're just
We had one, the first really scam call we had. A guy called and said that he had information about our son and told us our son had been murdered and gave us some names of individuals who supposedly did it. And